Hello, I'm Hannah Thibodeau. Welcome to CBC News Network. The clock is ticking down on the general election campaign in Manitoba. So after 4 weeks of pitching their messages, the parties have just a few hours left to win over voters, the ones that haven't already had their say, that is. Officials confirm over 200,000 people have cast their ballot in advance polling, and that is a new provincial record. The leaders to watch are Heather Stefanson of the Progressive Conservatives and Wab Kinew of the NDP, and Liberal Party's Dougald Lamont. The PCs are hoping for their third straight win, but recent opinion polls suggest a strong NDP showing. There are a total of 57 seats up for grabs. 32 of them are in or around Winnipeg. One issue that Heather Stefanson has campaigned on is not searching for missing and presumed murdered Indigenous women in a Winnipeg area dump because of the risk to workers. Some observers call it a risky political strategy. For more on this, we've reached Kelly Saunders. She's an associate professor of political science at Brandon University. Now, many Manitobans don't identify the landfill search as one of the key campaign issues. But let me ask you first, welcome to the program, of course. Why do you think Stefanson thought it was important to bring this to the forefront?
Hi, Hannah. It's great to be here. It is a little bit of an odd campaign strategy on the part of the Conservatives because, as you know, as you just mentioned, that when Manitobans were asked what are their top issues in opinion polls, it's no surprise it's issues like healthcare, affordability, crime. And so this certainly wasn't an issue that was on top of mind for voters, at least in terms of the election. Yet the Conservatives have made it a central plank of their platform. So what their strategy is behind this is a little bit odd for a lot of observers here in Manitoba.
Do you think that debate over the landfill will affect how people vote?
I think it will, but not in the way that I think the Conservatives are hoping. I think that they were hoping that this issue would be a motivator to get people out to vote for them. But what we're hearing on the ground, at least in circles around Winnipeg and in Manitoba, what people are saying is that if anything, it seems it's a little bit of an odd issue to be campaigning on because you're basically weaponizing and trying to politicize what is really a horrific, traumatic crime in this province. The police themselves have said that they believe the remains of these Indigenous women are in the landfill. So it is, in fact, a crime scene. So to have a political party sort of weaponize and politicize an issue that, is a disturbing crime situation is a little bit odd. So what I'm hearing is that people are saying it's not going to motivate me to vote for the Conservatives. But if anything, it's part of the reason for why I might choose to not vote for them.
That's really interesting. So meanwhile, it looks like the federal government might step in on this. Ottawa is set to announce whether or not they will help fund a landfill search. How could that, impact what's happening in that province?
Yeah, absolutely. The federal government has said, even previous Minister Mark Miller came out quite strenuously and said, these remains need to be located, and we're willing to partner with the province on moving forward on this. But the province needs to be at the table. And then Premier Heather Stefanson came out and said, basically, don't interfere with what's going on in Manitoba. So it was a little bit of a strange kind of standoff between the province and the federal government over this issue. Wab Kinew, leader of the NDP, has said that he is willing and welcomes the federal government to come to the table on figuring out how to move forward on this and to search and hopefully locate the remains of these women, whereas the Conservatives, have just doubled down and really dug in their heels on this. So I think the federal government is probably waiting to see what happens tomorrow and if there is a path forward on having a provincial partner at the table to find and locate these remains.
And if it is Heather Stefanson, could they impact that potential government?
Well, it's interesting because, again, the Conservatives have come out on a number of issues and said they're going to fight the federal government over the carbon tax specifically if they are reelected. Certainly, they've not welcomed and pushed back on the federal government on what they see as interference on the landfill issue. So I think that, if it is a Conservative government reelected tomorrow, then certainly there's going to be more animosity between Manitoba and the federal government on some of these critical issues. Where Whereas if it's an NDP government, it's going to be opposite. So, but I think the fact that the federal government is willing to come to the table is sending the message to Manitobans that maybe this is an issue that should be dealt with, that these remains should be looked for and hopefully located. And having the federal government sort of wade into this, I think, is something that will help the NDP and not the Conservatives.
What about for Indigenous women and girls who are watching this search and watching it become a political hot-button issue?
Yeah, and that is really the saddest issue in all of this, and something I think that we need to be mindful of. We can separate the politics from all of this and the fact that we're in an election campaign, but we have to be mindful of the fact that these are the remains of women that have allegedly been murdered at the hands of a serial killer. And there's families and loved ones that are still grieving over this. And it also sends the message as well to, as you just said, Indigenous women and girls that we know suffer far higher rates of crime and homicide than any other group of women and girls in the country. And so I think it's sending the message that their lives are not as valued as other women and girls. And at the end of the day, this is a crime and it needs to be addressed. So, we'll see what happens tomorrow. But I think Manitoba's really at a crossroads on how we look at these issues and how we're prepared to deal with them as a province and as a community.
Kelly Saunders, I want to thank you for being on the program today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Kelly Saunders is an associate professor of political science at Brandon University. Special election night coverage begins tomorrow on CBC News Network. David Cochran, the host of Power and Politics, will be live from Winnipeg. It begins at 4 p.m. Central. Now, coverage will continue throughout the evening. Our team in Winnipeg, host Janet Stewart, will bring the latest results and analysis as soon as the polls close. Now, that special event begins at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you for watching the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest breaking news and top stories, download the CBC News app.